No, don't fix anything, man.
This will be how you can start the interview with
live.
me fixing my hair.
I love your hair.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's Rob, right?
Raab. Depends on which member of the family you ask.
How do you prefer it?
Raab is pretty common around these parts.
Raab.
Yeah.
Jared Raab.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Well, yeah, I figured we could just kick this off with kind of what it is, right? Just a casual conversation between DPs over coffee.
Right.
If I had coffee, I'd be drinking coffee. I know Juan me.
Should have brought
He's
coffee.
probably got his coffee. There you go. But yeah, man, we're looking through your IMDb. You know, a lot of movies with director Matt Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of different types of stories, all kind of with this heightened documentary realism, very awesome aesthetic. But last year, Blackberry was the one that piqued Juanmi and I's interest, and probably good to kick it off with kind of that one first, and then work backwards if possible.
Certainly.
Like, yeah. How again, it's great. I just watched it last night, like admission. But so it's really fresh, and it's really I thought it was fantastic. How did that come about? Like, obviously you work with Matt Johnson a lot, but this latest one, like, similar, same as the first time you guys worked together, or?
Yeah, we've been working together as a team forever, and we all have kind of collected a larger team that's solidified. I think there's about 6 or so people that, if you look at the credits, have worked on absolutely everything that we have made together. And I think Blackberry was, for us, the first time that we had an opportunity to do something that was a little higher budget with name actors. Everything before that, all the Matt Johnson projects are just usually him and friends of ours acting in them. And, there's still lots of friends of ours in Blackberry, but we sort of saw it as an opportunity, I think, to prove that we could take what we learned in the style that we learned from our previous work and do something more, I don't know, perhaps mainstream, or, we kept calling it a real movie, which is maybe not fair to our previous movies, but I think for us it was one that, you could show to our grandparents and they would agree that that's a real movie.
You can show them Operation Avalanche too, because those two movies are both amazing. So you should be proud of all your work. But speaking of Blackberry, the thing that surprised me the most is like when I watched it, I was like, how the hell are they gonna make a movie about a freaking phone company? It's gonna be boring. I watched it because I've seen your previous work, Matt Johnson's previous work. I have to watch it, but And then I sat there and I was like, holy fuck, this is an amazing movie. It's very entertaining, and it's a real movie. But as you said, but what interests me most of the movie, it's particularly your job and how well the camera and the cinematography fit the story. And unfortunately, it's something that doesn't happen always. Sometimes it feels like we go one way, the movie goes the other way. And in your case, in this particular movie, it's perfect. I mean, I've watched it, I've seen it 3 times, and the first one I was just shocked. The second one I just like looked at it a little bit more in depth, and I couldn't think in anything better, camera-wise and lighting-wise, for that movie. To me, it's a perfect fit, the cinematography for the movie.
Whoa, take it easy.
No,
I wouldn't say that even. I mean, I think that, what's funny is that the way it came to be, the film was written by Matt Johnson and Matt Miller, who is the producer that we've been working with for many years. And they slowly, as they were writing it, started to realize it was a film that we could really make in our style. Because I think at first there was a thought that it would be a much more conventionally shot narrative, and I don't think that came from them. But I know that what really got them excited about making the film and doing it in our way was that we got to kind of a question that they asked themselves while writing the script was, if we were making the movie, what kind of movie would we want this to be? What would we want to see? And I think that that's probably why it feels like the style of the film really fits the film well, as it was always baked into the writing of the film, which is not always the case. You don't always have the luxury of a film written to be shot a certain way. And so from, the earliest stages, the narrative around how it would be shot, how we were going to make the movie was so inherent in the overall style of the film and the overall storytelling. We had all these rules that we set out for ourselves at the get-go around why the camera was there, what the language of the camera style would be, and how that would change and evolve with the story. And that came because it was being the visual side of it didn't come at the end. It wasn't like applied as a treatment at the end, trying to be like, what's the best way to tell this script? The script and the visual language evolved together. So it became very clear early on if a scene was going to work or not work, and could be changed and modified to fit the style, the same way that you would fit the style to an existing script. And the interplay between those things, I think, is, if it works, that's why. It very much has it had the ability to be fluid and such.
Mm. Yeah, I completely echo Wanmi's sentiment. Like, when you talk about appropriate cinematography, this really hit the nail on the head for me. You mentioned a couple times, like, the way, like, our type of movie, or the way we make movies. And could you kind of elaborate on, specifically going into this one, but maybe some of the other ones too, how did that come about? Did Matt, as he was writing, how early are you brought in? Just kind of the intricacies of that, your type of movie.
Yeah, I think partially because we're friends as well, not just, we've collaborated on a number of projects, but we're also good friends. So when a movie enters into the ether and there's an idea that this project is coming down the pipe, we'll start talking about it super early on. And for Blackberry, we had months and months of time to think about the film, how we were going to shoot it, how we were going to make it, and then had time to actually. One interesting thing that about the process of Blackberry that we'd never done before was we made an animatic with the storyboards of the entire film, and I think it might be a special feature on the Blu-ray or something. But basically, we knew before we made this film that we had always done things in a way where we would shoot a version of the film and be, have the time after we'd shot the scene once to go back and change it if we wanted. And the process was really organic that way, much like you would make a documentary and you might go and shoot more B-roll. We would do that with narrative scenes. So with Operation Avalanche and with our show, Nirvana the Band, the show, and the Dirties, every project we'd worked on was done in this way, where we'd go back, shoot scenes, take Matt back to the location, 2 months later, and grab a quick insert of a line. And we really liked that freedom, and obviously it makes the film better. But we knew we wouldn't have that luxury. We were working with actors that were going to lose them at a certain time, and we weren't going to be able to do the kind of reshooting that we thought. And so we figured we have to make all those mistakes before we go to camera, and we have to learn all those lessons before we go to camera. So we kind of made the movie once in our heads and through this animatic. And that, in some ways, I think allowed us to marry the more style. I know this is completely not the question you asked.
It's absolutely
a great answer. Yeah,
but it's just to say, before we would make movies, they'd be a mess. Like, we'd shoot, we'd reshoot. That's kind of our style, I think, is to have the form be this looser documentary found footage kind of language, which gives us the freedom to shoot it and do it in a way whereby we can pivot and correct and rethink where the movie's going and how we're making it as we're doing it. It comes from, I don't know if it comes from just like the fact that we came up in the DSLR era of filmmaking, where you really, all you needed was a point and shoot camera to make a movie, and there's a real optimism in the early 2000s around like, oh, now literally anybody can make a movie that looks like a real movie. In practice, it turns out most people found out it's a lot harder to make a movie than just going out with a camera. Yeah. But that sense of optimism that we could just do it, I think we learned pretty quickly. We can just do it. You just need to be able to fix it 10 times before it's actually going to be watchable. So we took that lesson, and I think that sort of became our style, is this really organic, loose shooting, let the scene play out, that kind of thing. And that very much ported to BlackBerry in terms of how it played out on set.
I think that shows in your movies, like all the movies that or the series that you have done with Matt. There is this feeling of a bunch of people doing something together, not just somebody telling the story. And I think that in a way, BlackBerry is the culmination of all that. It's like you've been refining it, at least it feels for me that you guys have been like polishing until BlackBerry. So my question will be is, do you and Matt have conversations about changing your style? Like
about changing? Oh, certainly. Well, I mean, in some ways, BlackBerry, we had that conversation quite a bit because we knew it had to be more watchable and watchable in a cinema if it was going to work as a feature film that you could go and see in theaters. And a lot of our work up to this point is, I wouldn't say it wasn't made for cinema, but there's a higher barrier to entry. So you kind of already have to be familiar with handheld, found footagey style to like it and for it to be easy to watch. But we wanted BlackBerry to be familiar enough for the average person to be able to sit down and watch it, and then, at that point you can capture a larger audience. I think there was a danger in shooting something being like, it's like a documentary, where it feels very loose in the way that's shot, where it becomes harder to watch as your average viewer is going to be put off by the shaky cam, that kind of thing. So we talked a lot about the movies that were coming out at that time, in the late 90s, early 2000s, and what the movies that were in theaters at that time looked like and felt like, and tried to find a happy medium between the fully doc style and something that feels elevated and cinematic. A lot of that was done just through the testing our formats and finding a texture for the film and a color palette for the film, which was really felt dramatic and had that cinematic quality. And a lot of the lighting is very the high ratio kind of stuff, slightly elevated in the way that the scenes are lit and the way that the spaces are lit, but then shot in a very grounded way. So
totally shows. I mean, it's that's the feeling I got. Like, this is a very well lit movie, shot in a very loose or documentary style, which it worked really well for me, at least.
Yeah, and also, I mean, that's also a great way for the actors. They loved that too, because we would light the spaces and light the environments rather than relighting for the close up, or we would just try to get the overall environment as close as we possibly could. Lit for, in a lot of cases, we shot 2-camera to let them just play the scene. And they loved that because they would completely forget about the cameras. There were times where, Glenn Howerton talked about coming on set and physically looking for the cameras and not being able to find them. Like, having no idea. He would have to ask where he couldn't, even with his eyes, he couldn't spot them. And so that's like a really fun thing, I'm sure, for an actor who's used to having a camera here. There are almost no shots in the film where the camera is within 10 feet of the actors. Everything is shot from quite a ways away. This, I'm giving up on this because it's dying every 5
Good.
minutes.
This is great.
So
This
we're gonna
perfect.
go with the Zoom or the whatever you're seeing here.
Squadcast or whatever
Yeah.
this is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's something that Wanami and I talk about a lot, and I think lately over coffee, it's like more and more is the freedom for actors to do their thing, and like you get again with the end product in mind and like a better movie in mind. Of there are certain movies that are shot in such a way where you can imagine it's like, hey, you stand here, you hit this mark, you can go like 2 inches this way and this way, but we'd prefer if you looked right here.
Right.
And this one felt completely. I mean, yeah, fly on the wall. Like I felt like a huge majority of the movie was very tight,
Yeah.
and very like intimate, and it added to the tension. You answered my question for the multiple cameras. I'm like, you had to have, right? You had to have.
Yeah, a lot of any conversation whenever we could, we would do 2 camera because there was also a feeling where we talked a lot about the level of access, which is probably not something normally you have to think about in terms of what most movies you don't really have to do too much work to justify why a camera is shooting what it's shooting. You're watching a movie, you understand this is a movie, the camera can go wherever it wants. But we really wanted the audience to be conscious of the feeling of being allowed into a secret conversation that maybe they weren't supposed to hear or they weren't allowed in the room for, and then being really conscious when we break that rule of like, oh, now the camera is allowed in and now it's not allowed in. So for example, at the beginning of the movie, the camera, when it's at Sutherland Schultz, which is Jim's first job, is far, far away. It's shooting from halfway across the office through multiple windows to get the shot inside Jim's office. Because in our minds, the audience will feel very much like they are not allowed in Jim's office. They have not been really given access to his thing because he's the kind of guy who would reject that. But then conversely, we would be cutting it against Rim 1, which was all these goofy engineers playing video games. And those cameras are right in the room with them. They're kind of part of the gang. And the difference between those, the sort of access that the cameras have create this great dynamic where all of a sudden when Jim shows up and is walking in the room, it feels like, oh, we've been busted. Like he's busted into our clubhouse. And I'm sure that's because of you've been used to the language around the camera. And I have a theory about the language of what the camera is doing and how it's changing based on how much we are consuming self-shot, low-budget, amateur video. It's most people now are seeing more video shot by family members and friends than they are of movies and television. We have a real our diet of visual media consists mainly of stuff shot by non-professionals or low-end professionals. And we only have this little piece of our visual language that we're still training on this very high-end stuff, which is very different than it was in the 80s and 90s, where the only thing you could see were movies and television. And I think now we've got like our cinematic language is slowly expanding, but you look at a lot of cinema being made right now, and it's very much stuck in the old language where things are being made the same way with the same shots and the same style. Maybe we'll introduce some handheld, maybe but I think people's knowledge of what it means to have a camera right here versus a camera across the room is different. It's not all faked, some of it is real. And so the average person will understand the difference between a camera that has access to a room and a camera that does not have access to the room in a way which is so much more advanced than it would have been 15, 20 years ago. And I think that's like I think that we'll see more and more people tapping into that new language around is this real? If the person holding the camera is a real person, I understand that. Another small example would be when we were shooting Nirvana the Band, the show, which is a comedy. A joke would be funnier if the camera became unstable. a joke. You'd play a scene, and if the camera was perfectly locked off and static, and the shot was perfect, it would be one thing. But if the camera started to bounce and lost focus, it would be much funnier to watch. And it just made me realize, even though we've established this is, maybe you're not thinking about who's behind the camera, but you understand the language of, if the camera is out of control, this is really funny. Because we've seen enough videos of people filming their friends laughing that just gives you that feeling that, oh, I should laugh at this too. And that kind of stuff is really interesting.
Yeah, it kind of feels like if the camera is not moving, it's a stage.
Yeah.
And if the camera is moving, it's like, oh, this is happening for real. Someone's capturing the moment, that kind of stuff.
And what I'm really interested in is what happens when you take that language and then you put it into the world of a cinematic film, which could do anything, right? Where suddenly this camera can be totally static, perfect, look gorgeous, do a slow push in, whatever. But you can still port those small little bits of language over to the high-end cinema, and they're even more powerful because we're not used to seeing them in like gorgeous, RE shallow depth of field, with a nice warm cinematic texture.
And don't you feel that this thing that is happening, that we are kind of embracing all the TikToks and the home video and that we all do, plus the television into the movies, we're in a way losing what makes the movies different from any other media, which are the wide shots, because we keep shooting tighter and tighter, because first of all we're watching a small monitor on set or through the eyepiece, and we are used to be fed with television shows where are this all the time, and most of the videos that we see on Instagram or TikTok are close-ups.
Of course.
And I always have the feeling that where are the wide shots? Where are the?
It's so true. It's so funny you're saying it, because we kept in when we were looking at the dailies in BlackBerry, we kept like being frustrated that we weren't getting wide because we couldn't. We were like, oh, we can't really go wide here because it's the language of a person holding a camera being like, what's going on there is to get tighter.
Yeah.
That just naturally they want to get tighter. So it's a harder. I watched Lawrence of Arabia in theaters like 6 months ago.
That's an experience.
I was like, I couldn't believe the wides in that movie. The way they would put, if this is the frame, it's like your characters are here and they're this big and they're millimeters from the edge of the bottom of frame, something that you would never see, DP do normally.
And they hold the shot for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's that sense of what they're going for, right? Like Lost in the Desert, the oppressive nature of like the environment. Yeah. It's a similar, appropriate idea.
Right.
I mean,
right. But it's very true. It's how wides fit in. There is like one time where I know you can always use a wide, that when shooting in the style that we were shooting in, which is that if you want it to feel profoundly uncomfortable, you can always pull back to the wide and hold that, and suddenly it's like, oh, because it's like it's the language of an embarrassed camera person who wants to pretend they're not involved, wants to disengage. But
totally.
But
it's punctuation
tough.
though. That's an exclamation point on some of those uncomfortable scenes because you're here.
Right. Yeah.
Are you this kind of DP? Your style as a DP is one with Matt, and a complete different one with others, or like you are a director too, right? You direct music videos.
Yeah.
Do you?
Although
Do you carry this style that we're talking about on Operation Avalanche and Nirvana and BlackBerry, that they kind of belong to the same world? Do you carry that style when you shoot with something else or for somebody else, or is just a thing that for Matt?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think that there are certain projects, like I did one of those VHS 94 horror movie segments, which again was found footage, and that felt incredibly natural just because it's in the same world of, oh, this needs to feel 100% real. But for a completely different reason, it was horror, not comedy. And the rules are basically the same, which is that if it feels real, it feels scary, much the way that if it feels real, it feels funny. But for other stuff, no, I think that like a lot of the music videos I do are like animation or some weird computer, scanning technique or weird, more experimental out there stuff. And I think that BlackBerry also taught me that, what's nice is I also think that Matt will slowly head in a more like found footage aspect of the shooting. You could lose that entirely, and the language can be ported. Like the language that you learn from shooting things that are meant to be real is the same language that you use when shooting something that does not need to be real at all. And it just so happened that the more loose handheld style worked for BlackBerry, but I think on a completely, if it was a film where every shot was single camera planned, you could still port the same language. I mean, that's sort of what I would be interested in doing next is films which are much more conventional, are not trying to feel like a documentary, are not trying to feel like somebody's in the room, but still use those tricks and those tools and that language, because that is just the language of modern cinema, and I think it's the language that people are so familiar with. So, it's exciting to me to think about a film that is shot. It's 100% fiction, not trying to play into feeling too real at all, not trying to really make you conscious of the camera in the room, never raising the question about who are these camera guys and why are they here, but uses the tricks and the tools from real documentary footage to help tell that story. I'll give another small example I'll give you is like, so I'll now be watching a horror movie, and I'll notice that when they, occasionally, when they reveal the in the scarier moments, what the camera will do is push in slowly, right? Which gives you that really unsettling feeling of like, I don't want to go this way. Whereas, and of course, there's many reasons to do that. One is to reveal the scary monster or like that there's something in the woods. But my instinct is always when I'm seeing that stuff is that they should be pulling away, because that's the feeling of holding the camera and walking backwards, and having shot enough stuff where I have to actually think about what the cameraman is thinking. I think that we still don't quite get it as cinematographers, that it's like, no. Now we really can just put the audience into that cinema camera. Like that can just be the audience's POV. And if that's the main character looking at the woods and there's sounds coming from the woods, you'll never see it. It's always a push in. But imagine we're slowly pulling back and how much scarier that is. And so it's just always reminding me that there's like, oh no, there are like, we half get it. We're still stuck in the old world, right? We're still thinking about the tools of the 90s, 2000s, and that there's a whole rich territory.
But that should be our main obligation as cinematographer. Just think always on what's best for the storytelling, for the movie, and think out of the box. I mean, if everybody does that, we should at least ask ourselves, what happens if I do this?
Right.
At least think about it, and at least give it a try. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think that's our obligation as a.
Oh,
as
but
DPs.
even when it doesn't work, I mean, this is why, you watch so many films, and I'll be trying to figure out what's working, why the thing that I'm watching isn't working. I'm sure you do the same thing. You'll be like watching something, you'll be like, this isn't great, but why isn't it great? And you are trying to do the math on like what it is about the film that you're watching that isn't playing. And 9 times out of 10, the biggest problem is that the camera is not making a decision. There's no storytelling in where the camera is placed and why. It's not making a bold choice. It's making the obvious choice or the conventional choice, and it's trying to be unobtrusive and just let the actors act, or just let the, dialogue carry the story forward or whatever. And whenever a camera is doing that, to me, it's like you're leaving half your money on the table, because the whole fun of a movie is you get to make those choices. Like, you get to decide what you see, what the audience sees, and what they don't see. And when a camera is making no choices, it's inherent. No matter how good it is, there's a ceiling. In film school, one of the students who was a year above me was this guy named Matthew Lloyd, who's now shooting amazing stuff in Hollywood. He ended up doing through doing the latest Power Rangers movie and starting to do more and more CGI stuff, has become a cinematographer who does. He actually shot that Daredevil series. I don't know if you remember, whoever saw it on
Yes.
TV a few years ago. Amazing looking series, really bold, interesting shooting choices.
Yeah.
Brilliant guy. But I knew him in film school, and he went on an NYU exchange program to the Czech Republic for a summer and studied with them to learn 35 millimeter filmmaking. And he came back and basically told me and another friend of mine, Lindsay McKay, who's a filmmaker, you guys need to go do this program. If you can get in, you should apply. And so we went and we applied and we got in and went with all these other NYU students for just a few months to their film school in Prague called FAMU. And it was like, it kind of redefined what, I learned a lot of great things in film school, but I can really attribute my philosophy of film and film language to what I learned over just a few months from the European. They were old school Czech filmmakers, and cinematographers that were teaching there. And their whole thing was just that, film is a language, and you learn the language, and it has sentence structure, and it has words, it has rules that you can then break, and it very, very much feel that the American or North American style of filmmaking was slowly eroding and killing the language of film, which is a great, thing to learn when you basically have come up in that style, because they felt that there was a fundamental misunderstanding about film, in that specifically one of the professors did this amazing test where he basically broke down every great film into how many extreme close-ups, wides, or medium shots, wides, and extreme wides, and looked at all of the great films through history and graphed them to see what was using what. And invariably, the films that have stood the test of time that we watch over and over again, that are classics, for lack of a better term, had more extreme wides and extreme close-ups than close-ups and wides, and the least amount of medium shots, and the curve went like that. And the ones that, the more modern movies that were in cinemas, or the ones that were forgotten, from his sample, the ones with heavy on the medium shot like this, that they would attribute to American, American television or American movies that were being made, had more medium shots. And his explanation of why the ones with more wides and more extreme close-ups were good was fascinating, and I think about it a lot. I'll try not to, it's like a real rabbit hole I'm going down here. But basically he explained a scene where, let's say it's a cowboy in the middle of the desert. We're going to open the scene two different ways. One is the conventional, we'll say American way to open a movie, which is, okay, it's a cowboy sitting in front of a fire warming his hands. Let's start that scene in a medium shot, the way that, with some flames licking up from the fire. You see the hands warming by the fire like this. You see the cowboy. You see a bit of the horizon, the sun going down. And he said, how long do you think you could hold in that shot with nothing happening before you need to cut away to the next shot? Or maybe, 30 seconds, so you'd tolerate that. If nothing's happening, then maybe you get 30 seconds of it. He goes, okay, let's flip it. Let's say we start it in an extreme close-up on the eyes. And you don't see the fire, but you hear it. And you don't see the background. and you don't see the character and you don't know where they're sitting. You just see the eyes. How long can you hold in that shot? And when you really think about it, you're like, you could hold in that shot for an extremely long time. Because you see, okay, this is a person's eyes. Then you start to go, oh, I hear the crackling of the fire. Okay, they must be at a campfire. Then you start to build out the world around them based on what you hear. And then at a certain point, you're going to start looking at the eyes and saying, what are they thinking? What are their clues to that? And you can hold on that. You could hold on that shot for 2 minutes straight before you need to cut. And he's like, and then what do you cut to? Do you cut to the medium? No, we already know everything that's in the medium. You cut to the extreme wide.
Yeah.
And it's like that, like right away, he's like, now you're watching a piece of cinema, right? He's like, the first way, you basically have run out of steam in 30 seconds. The audience knows everything, and who cares? When you cut to that extreme wide, it's not going to mean anything, right? You're not going to feel the feeling you feel going from here to the wide. And so, I often think about that, where I'm just like, you must restrict what the audience is seeing through the camera, and let what you're not showing have equal or greater value than what you are showing. Like, what you're choosing not to focus on is, like, in many ways more important than what you're pointed at. Because by not showing something, the audience builds it themselves, and then you get to either subvert or confirm those expectations.
Exactly. Yes, you let the audience think and make their own worlds. And then suddenly when you go back, it's like, oh, I was right, I wasn't right, or that surprised me, or
Sure.
you're making the audience work in a way.
Well, it's respectful to the audience.
And it's respectful to the audience, yeah, absolutely.
You're like, hey, I know you're smart enough to, do this and figure it out, versus being shown exactly, yeah.
Well, and it's just, it's so boring to watch something where all the answers are laid out for you.
Yeah.
You can't engage, it's like there's nothing there.
No.
You check out immediately.
Is there? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Do you have any desire to direct a movie? Because the way you sound, the way your process is with Matt's movies, where you are very early in the process. I'm pretty sure you have some inputs on the script that end up in the movie for sure. So it's like that's baked in you. It feels like you're also directing your own stuff, like music videos. Is there that step is going to be there in the future, like directing your own movies, or not?
I think I'm of two minds about it. One is, I think the reason why I enjoy cinematography as much as I do is because of how involved I've been able to be in the larger creative process, in how the movie is being put together, and can be there very, very early, and also, they're in the sound mix, and they're in the grade, and they're in the final VFX, and that to me is part of the joy of filmmaking, is shepherding a project through all of its stages. And obviously, a lot of times in the current system that we work in, that's the only other person that gets to do that is the director, and the producers as well. But really, their mind is on more than just telling the best story possible. They have multiple balls to juggle, and so in some ways, yes, that is, directors get to do that too, and I love that process, and I'd be happy to be a part of that. But I think, on the other hand, as a cinematographer, if it's working right, and if you are doing your job properly, and if the director that you're working with and the team that you're working with understands how much a cinematographer can bring to a project, then I would be more than happy to just do nothing but shoot for the rest of my life. Because it is so, when that relationship is working properly, you are very much directing the film. You are extremely creatively involved in the storytelling. And when that works, then, I have no desire to step outside of that. But I have in the past, when brought onto projects, sort of said, well, I am somebody, it is hard for me not to try to contribute outside of, if a scene is not working and I feel like the thing that's not working about it is not, I won't be able to fix through how it's shot. I think I would have a really hard time being the kind of cinematographer who's just, nods and stays behind the camera and doesn't get involved in that stuff. But hopefully, I would say that as long as I'm working with directors that understand the value that cinematography can bring, and that how vital that is, and that's not just cinematography too. I think about the editors that we work with, Kurt Laub and Robert Upchurch are these editors we work with all the time. I mean, they are just as involved in writing the movie and in the storytelling, and they come on very, very early in the process as well. And that every key member of the team, the production designer, I don't think people would be so desperate to direct their own film if they weren't feeling somewhat unfulfilled by having to work on films that don't give them scratch that itch, which is why I know a lot of cinematographers and a lot of people who work in, film that want to be doing the next level up in terms of the job, first ACs that want to shoot. But on the other hand, I think if a set is working and a team is working to their absolute peak level of creative care and being invested in the film and all working to make a great film, that it would be creatively fulfilling all the way down the line. Your key grip would feel just as fulfilled as you do on a daily basis, because they would know that they're being heard and their ideas are helping and that they're empowered to be creative and all of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally feel that. One of the questions I had was in working with Matt, just kind of technically, how again, you talk about involvement and fulfillment. When he's also acting in the film, how does that dynamic work, like throughout a scene that he's actively involved in? Is he kind of relying more so on your eye and your knowledge of the scene that you guys have built in prep? Definitely,
yeah. Part of it is that heavy prep to the point where we are all very much on the same page, and the other part of it is that the entire key creative team is empowered to say something and contribute ideas and notice performance that could be better or have ideas for performance and that kind of thing, and getting rid of some of the structures of the industry that make that harder to do. The idea that you could never tell the director to do something differently on set is kind of, I think that's counterproductive. I understand why those rules came to be, but I think that if you're in a situation where you're disempowering your crew to be able to make creative decisions and to contribute creatively on set, then you're taking a huge piece of your creative resources out of the project. We would do on Blackberry, we would shoot a scene. If Matt was in it, it would be me, Jay McCarroll, one of the producers, Matt Miller, the other producer, and Adam Belanger, the production designer. I mean, we would all gather around the monitor afterwards and meet with Matt and talk about, okay, this worked, you went over here. You know what you should try is a line where you do this. And it's like, when you say that line, we're kind of missing that. Is there another way? And it's like, if there had been any ego problems around that, the film would not have turned out as well as it did. That's such a key part of working that way. And for him to be able to be on camera and not thinking about that, he has to know that people are watching the monitor and are going to catch if something's not working. Because God forbid you get into the edit room and something glaringly obvious that would have made the scene better, that everybody on set was seeing, but didn't feel like they were in a place to say. I mean, that's a nightmare situation. And certainly, I think actors are very comfortable. I learned this working with more established actors. They're very comfortable with a DP having opinions. Thank goodness that's sort of baked into the industry. But because one thing I did notice, and this is, I guess, a bit of an aside because it's not directly cinematography related, but our producers and the AD, Matt Grayson, and Matt Miller, the producer on the film, they also had opinions. But for actors who have been in the industry long enough, normally what that reads to them is network notes. They think there's the money people leaning over being like, they can't say that line. Why don't we get another take of that? So they're kind of allergic to it. So I think that there's like some training that needs to occur when the whole team is really just trying to make the movie better. Like everyone is there with got the glasses on to be trying to make the film as good as it can be. It took the actors a little while to realize that a crowd around the monitor making, with everyone chiming in was good. It wasn't a bad thing, and it wasn't something to be like, what the fuck is going on over there?
Yeah.
Because normally that's like, oh, those are the network notes coming in trying to mess up the creative. Whereas in this case, it was the opposite. It was really like, how can we make this better?
We had a similar experience shooting a movie for Emilio Estevez. He was directing it and performing. So basically, it was Alex operating the camera and me and the script supervisor watching the monitor. And I remember the first time he goes like, cut. He's in the shot and he goes like, cut. And he turns around and look at me like from 20 meters away. I go like, Juanmi, is it good? And I was like, yeah. I don't know, well, technically it's good. The frame is good. Everything is good. I mean, the performances, I have no idea. I mean, I do have an opinion, but obviously. And he was like, well, just don't worry. I'll take care of the performances.
Yeah.
Obviously, if there's something really wrong, tell me. But you tell me all the rest. And if you're comfortable with it, I'll be comfortable with it. And the first few days was like, oof, I got to weight to carry here that it's not a load that I should be carrying. Until it became something that I really enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
It was something great. It was like, I as you said, like I felt so into the movie. I felt so that movie is a little piece of me too. Not only as a DP that already is, but
it makes the shooting better.
It makes the shooting better.
When you are invested in the performances, the shooting will be better because it'll be more responsive to what's happening and what they're bringing. There's this total unpredictable element once you get on set. And if you are deeply invested in the story and know all the beats and are thinking about those as much as the director, not just let's nail it exactly as we pictured it, I think the film will be better because you will be tapped into not just what you planned, but also what you're seeing. And the director will sometimes catch that and be able to pivot. But the more people you have that are tracking it, and can make those little adjustments just to make it that much better, the better the end movie will be.
Mm-hmm. Does with him acting, you kind of focusing on, you're also keeping an eye on performance, you're operating a camera, you've got a B operator. Again, you've spoken about your philosophy for kind of lighting the space to have enough room to dance around. Do you ever catch yourself man, I'd really like to be at monitor watching both, like with my eyes on it, or are you just like, this is laid out perfectly where we can't just play and I trust my B operator so perfectly that
part of it is just that level of trust. We have on this movie that we're making right now, I've rigged up a little iPhone second monitor on my camera so I can peek at what B camera is shooting. Which is a luxury we've never been able to really figure out properly before. And that is really nice because it's sort of, out of my periphery, I have a sense of what they're getting. And more importantly, for a B operator, usually I'll take the more challenging dramatic turn camera and then, but for them to be able to see what a camera is doing in real time and have that little monitor as well, I notice makes a huge, huge difference. There's just like a confidence there because, the B-cam operator knows that if they're not getting notes that I'm happy with what's there and there's none of that like, I hope this is right. And when everyone's confident, oh my God, the shooting is so much better. I'm sure when you operate, you notice how when you think you're nailing it, how much better the shooting is than when you're even a little bit questioning yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, the Venn diagram of cinematographers that are really, really up on what cameras are coming out when and like what the latest codecs are that are better to shoot, and ones that are like really brilliant storytellers is probably not a direct one-to-one crossover. I find that like, a lot of the times I feel like I'm behind the times and then have to remind myself that like ultimately that stuff is not going to make the shooting that much better.
Tools for the job.
Yeah. And then also you can always just, I've learned that like testing, just like endless testing to the point where like it seems absurd. Like different lenses, different cameras, different setups
Sure.
is really the best way to do anything. You know, I've never shot two projects on the same camera. I don't think it's like, you know, the tool set for each story is going to be different no matter how you slice it, and and if you can find the right, you know, camera and setup and lenses and everything for the job, it actually makes life so much easier because half that work is being done for you and you're not fighting against it.
Yeah. Wanmi, actually, I will bring up something kind of technical and interesting, and you speak about testing, and Wanmi brought up something. That little like print thing. You want to talk about that?
About Operation Avalanche?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, well, first of all, I have to say that I'm not very, very interested in the technical aspect of cinematography. I kind of use the camera that it's convenient for the shoot, and the lenses that work for the shoot. I'm not like, oh, I always shoot Panavision, or I always shoot anamorphic. So it's just whatever is more convenient. And sometimes less pixels are more convenient than more pixels. But I did want to ask a technical question because on Operation Avalanche, you guys did something that I feel like if we were talking about the impact of the cinematography on storytelling, in Operation Avalanche, the cinematography is the storytelling in a way, because you guys nailed that look of the 60s, that grainy 60 millimeter of the 60s. But what is really interesting is you guys did it with a pocket camera, right?
A lot of it we shot. I mean, that was like a brand new camera at the time, the Blackmagic Pocket. And that was just because we had to do some clandestine shooting. You know, like the Pocket Cam, the Blackmagic Pocket camera is about this size. The first one that came out, just that 1080 one, it's a micro four thirds sensor, which is really similar to 16 mil. And then I think at one point we justify, and we see the camera that the film is set in for people who haven't seen it, it's set in the 1960s, and it's meant to look like archival 60s doc footage from that era. And we showed, I think, I think there's a Super 8. I'm actually thinking about that Kubrick sequence. We faked it as if it was shot on a little Super 8 camera hidden in a bag, I think. Yeah. But a lot of it was pocket cam. A lot of it actually was shot when we were doing more of the studio shoulder-mounted stuff on a Red camera that we kitted out to be very similar to the old Oricon style 16 millimeter dock cameras of the era. So with a vintage ingenue zoom that we stole off of an old news camera from our film school, and then had it changed over to PL mount. So it was a bit of a mishmash, but it was all modern digital cameras. And we used these old lenses, which gave a nice vignette, and they're soft, and they look kind of, they bloom. You know, if something was too bright, you'd get that great blooming highlight and things. And then at the very end of the process, we graded the entire movie once, printed it to 16 millimeter, a whole bunch of different old stocks, and then rescanned it, and then regraded it at the very end with coming back from 16. And what that let us do was to kind of mix and match different stock formats to different scenes. So like, for example, the bright sunny day stuff looked better on one stock, and then there's a point where the film needs to look really damaged, and we did that on a print stock that we like dragged behind a car, and you know, Matt Miller decomposed it with a bunch of soil in his shower and to try to get it to and then rescanned all that stuff. So it was like we realized early on in the process with our colorist Connor, we've worked with forever, that no matter how, and Connor's brilliant, but I think the most brilliant thing about him is that he's unafraid to admit that, you know, he's a colorist who understands that color well enough to understand that he can only do so much. And when we put up his best 16 millimeter emulation up against actual rescan 16, he was the one who told us, absolutely go with the real 16. That is like, I will never be able to do the amazing, unpredictable things that I'm seeing in that footage.
Yeah.
And he could see that there was a intangible quality to the organic film stock that was doing things that no color, plug-in was ever going to be able to do, and gave us that final push to do it that way.
If you had the chance of shooting the entire thing on 16 millimeters, would you do that?
Oh, we would, for sure we would have. The only problem is the way we shoot things, and like I was saying, have to shoot things over and over and over again. The entire budget of the film would have just been
that
the
would
stock.
Be crazy.
Yeah. But
I actually think watching it today this morning again. First of all, I was like, I had to look at it because I was like, oh, this is 16 millimeters, and I was like, no, that may be digital transfer to 16, and then I was like, no, that's for sure 16, and at one point I just stopped the movie and I Googled it, and then I learned that because the process is so good that it actually looks like 16 millimeters.
Yeah, well, and it's funny. There's like 2 or 3 shots in the whole movie where we shot exactly the way we were shooting it. But this is, again, why testing is so valuable. We had to use a modern lens because these 16 lenses didn't go wide enough for certain shots we needed. So we put a modern, sharper lens on the camera, and it was like the red 18 mil or something. And it stands out like a sore thumb to me. I see that shot, and every time I'm like, that's the one shot that doesn't feel like true 16. And it was because you realize, if we didn't have, cinema cameras that could shoot 12 stops of latitude, it wouldn't have worked. If we'd overexposed even slightly, it wouldn't have worked, because you can notice in the highlights digital does something completely different. And then if we didn't print it to 16, it wouldn't have worked. It was like everything, we had to figure out, it had to be this, and if we didn't learn one of those lessons, I don't think it would have sold as true 16.
I think that thinking about it today, I think that it may be a choice that I will do today if I had to shoot a movie like this. And even having the possibility of shooting everything 16. Yeah. Because you guys shot at nights, and obviously you cannot do that with 60 millimeter stock footage, because with just street lights and shop windows and stuff, that it feels that it's with the available light only, that you can do that really with 16 millimeters. The grain will be too heavy. So I think that the way you guys used the best of both worlds was very smart, and it made me think, if I had to do this today, I may take that route too, and not shoot 16.
Plus, the VFX was a big part of it. There are a few sequences like the car chase, which have a lot of VFX and bullet holes and things added. And being able to do that on a clean image, then add a sort of digital grain and softness, which is what we did to bring it all together, then print it and get the real 16 mil film grain. And those VFX suddenly sell.
Just blend right in.
Way better than if we had to do them over top of existing grain. It would have been a nightmare for them to try to match the texture and the color and everything perfectly for those VFX shots.
Sorry, Alex, I'm gonna chime in again.
No, go. I'm sitting back listening and just enjoying. Go for it.
That car chase, it's amazing. It's amazing for 2 reasons. One, because it feels really dangerous with the camera not always being on the back seat. Like, actually, there's a camera operator there just doing that thing. And also because I don't know if you have the temptation of doing it, but you never betrayed the nature of the shot. It has to be a oneer. There's no other choice, because if we cut this, we're gonna betray ourselves. And it has, for me, it has the two things. One, you didn't betray yourselves, which it will be easy to do in a kind of scene like that, and also being honest with the point of view that the movie has. You made an amazing chase, because the camera goes going back and forth. It makes it much more dangerous to me.
But doesn't that get back to what we were talking about before with the choice? Like,
exactly.
It's better to do that and even if we'd screwed up a few things, I still think it would be a better sequence than if you make the concessions before you go to do it. Like making the hard choice to just be like, we're gonna do it, and hopefully it works. That's why naivete, like being for lack of a better way of saying it, like a young and stupid filmmaker, before you know all the rules, is actually an incredibly powerful place to be, and why people's first features or young people who make a film for the first time are often doing all these crazy interesting things, is because you don't know that you can't. Like you haven't learned what's easy and what's not easy yet, so you just say, oh yeah, we're just going to do that. And trying to what gets harder is trying to preserve some of that spirit once you know what's easy and what's going to be hard. And just being able to say no, we're going to do it. We'll just do it. Because just in enacting the choice to do it, and to do it for real, or to shoot it the hard way, knowing, oh, this is already a big day, all right, we'll do it, but we still want to do this shot this crazy way, which could fail. Even if you mess it up a little bit, the audience will feel like that you're not robbing the audience of the cinematic experience in the same way. Whereas when you start to make concessions about how you're going to shoot something, and you start to whittle away at, and this happens all the time, I think you see it in big studio movies, some of the larger studio films that come out, you can just feel the committee whittling down what might have been a crazy idea to something very, very safe, very doable. And what you're left with is, nothing. It's like you basically get the worst possible version of the scene. Even if you didn't get the absolute best possible version of the scene, even if that would have been, might have had mistakes in it, even if that means maybe the VFX would have been harder to do, we keep noticing that a lot of the times things don't get done because somebody at some point says that's really hard to do that, actually. That actually is really difficult, or no one's done that before, and there's a way you do it, the right way to do a scene like this.
That's the exact reason to do something.
Yeah.
No one has done it before. Okay, so now
Great.
we have
to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The last coffee Juan and I had, we were talking about this almost exact thing of you start out in prep with this idea of what our movie is going to be, and on the process to getting to the finish line, I always thought about it, the idea of holding an egg and people are bouncing into you and you're trying to just get the egg to the finish line. But Wanmi had a great kind of metaphor of, what was it, like a water in a bucket?
Yeah,
right?
I said
you've got your ideal.
You get a bucket full of water in one side at the first day on prep, with all your great ideas and all your experience and all your tools, and an empty bucket on the other end. And so making a movie, it's like when you carry that water with your bare hands, while people is pushing you around, whatever it lands at the end of the other side of the bucket, that's the movie. So your job is to protect that water with your life, to carry as much water from the first bucket to the second. But your bare hands and people is pushing at you, and you have to kind of wiggle it. But that's what making a movie is. And to your point, being protective with that vision as a director, especially, but us as DPs too, and in the process of helping them, being protective to that vision and being protective to that unique voice, it's what makes you, what separates you from the average director and from the average filmmaking. And I think that that's probably the thing that I respect most from any filmmaker is their own voice. Even if it's wrong.
Right.
But you tried, and you tried uniquely. There's nobody else who's gonna try it like you did. That to me is like golden. I want to work with people like that all the time, even if they're wrong. Even if we make a movie that is not completely perfect because we failed, but
tried.
It's a unique voice. It's not. There's not going to be another guy in LA or in Boston or in Atlanta that's shooting the exact same things that we're shooting.
The worst thing you can do, especially as like an emerging filmmaker or an emerging DP or anything, is to make something that just lands nowhere. It's not. You don't try too hard, and you don't fail bad. It looks exactly as planned, but you didn't shoot up here. You shot here and you land there, and then it disappears because you haven't tried to do something that's interesting. And we talked about this too with BlackBerry, where we were like, the only way we could really, really screw this up and make a huge, and really bone ourselves with this film is if it just feels 100% conventional. And it's like, if we don't do something here that's like a little different, then there's going to be no reason to watch this movie, and there's going to be no reason to talk about this movie. So we have to do something that's trying something in the way that it's shot that is a little bit unexpected. And always, always the best thing to do is use the tools that are your, everyone's voice and their own kind of secret weapon. Like even if you, for example, John Wilson as like a filmmaker is a great example. He's a filmmaker in New York. He does a show, How To with John Wilson, and he has a very unique style of filmmaking where he shoots everything on Handycam. But, he started by doing corporate jobs. He had a corporate job just doing like Home Shopping Network. And so all his things have this very formal, observed, almost boring style to the way that they're shot. And that's what's so amazing about watching his films, because the story, what he's filming is totally out to lunch and crazy, but it's a sort of non-judgmental, almost flat, dead-on style to the way everything's shot. The interviews are all done like him with the camera straight to person. And you try to think about like, if he tried to make work that didn't use the tool set that he already had become comfortable with and didn't use the language that he had already learned, he would be doing a huge disservice to the project, because we all kind of learn these weird, unique languages of cinema when we're not trying to emulate other people's styles. Inherently, every artist is going to develop a unique voice as long as you're not trying to just copy what you've already seen. And I think that a mistake that a lot of young filmmakers make is that there's a period in your career where you have to just try to, I want to learn how to copy, and I learn how Christopher Nolan would do a scene. There's a lot of these YouTube videos, breakdown how Wes Anderson frames his shots, and that's the role of the film critic, or the role of the film studies person, is to know and study the language of other people's style. But one of the hardest things is to actually figure out what your style is. And 9 times out of 10, you will inherently develop a style as long as you're not trying to copy and make your film exactly the way that somebody else would make it, or shoot the film in the style of a cinematographer you already know and love. It's fine to take little pieces and sort of learn little bits from filmmakers you love and cinematographers you love. But to try to emulate is, do that in your own time. Don't do that when you're trying to make a project.
Couldn't agree more. Just being authentic. Like, the best art is born out of pure authenticity, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Do you work with references when you're prepping a movie?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I think that lands on the that what you said. It's okay to grab pieces, no? In my case, I use the references on prep because it's easy to communicate with others through references, but those references never land on set.
Yeah.
I just left them behind. I left them behind because there's a moment on prep that my movie is my movie. The references just were a starting point.
Yeah.
So do you work like that too, or do you have a different approach?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think it's good to watch a lot of stuff with the people that you're going to be making the film with, or the project with. Like, you learn a lot, not just about what you like, but also about where their taste lies, where their intentions are going to be in terms of when you get into the nitty gritty of planning the shots in the scene. And a lot of what's great about references is you can find a reference that's really close to what you want to do. We watched movies like The Big Short, and we watched, I'm trying to think of we watched Succession. We watched, I'm trying to think of we watched some of The Office even. And we were sort of trying to be like, okay, what can we glean from this? And it was great when we found something where we're like, oh, this is really cool. For example, we learned to shoot on these longer lenses loose on a slider from The Big Short, which is how they did that on these, work with a larger cinema zoom, but have it feel loose and handheld. That's how he did it. We modified it slightly from there, but that was like a huge revelation because we loved how long the zooms were like 20 to 300 mil, and we were like, how on earth are they doing that handheld with a cinema camera? And there was a technique behind how they were getting those shots. On the other hand, there were all these things that we'd be like, we don't want to do that. Oh, we wouldn't put a camera there. Oh, the camera, ugh. All of a sudden they're cutting in the room to a third and a fourth and a fifth angle. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure we're stuck with 2 or 3 angles, And all these, like, you learn just as much about what you don't want to do. And the closer the reference is to what you're trying to make, the more you should be spotting the things that you don't want to take.
That you don't want to do, actually.
Yeah. And that's why references are great, because you kind of get to reinforce your own taste through watching stuff. And you learn just as much from seeing stuff that you're like, that really doesn't work. Like, they almost nail it, but we want to do it a little differently, or we'd never insert a shot like that in a sequence like this. And we kept finding that in even all of the references we watched. We'd be like, it's sort of that, The Big Short has a lot of that great observed feel, but then there's all these arbitrary choices as well, where it's like, why did they cut to this angle, So there were just as much that we would look at our references that we loved, and even the ones we thought were really close to the style, and would be able to reinforce mistakes that we would have probably made had we not seen somebody else make the mistake first.
Isn't it great when you're looking for a reference and you can't find it?
Yeah, right.
And it's like, I can find it. That's awesome. That means that I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
I wonder if some of those other, again, like The Big Short, I mean, you're referencing kind of larger films. I wonder if some of that committee aspect comes into play there, and whereas something like this, maybe you have a little more of a tight-knit decision maker community and less influence. Not to say that's the case, but I'm just curious.
I imagine so, although I think some of it too is like resources, right? The budget for The Big Short is massive compared to BlackBerry. I mean, we have sometimes having too much in terms of budget and resources can lead you down paths that you didn't need to go down, and then thinking about a scene where they've got it covered from 6 different angles where you probably didn't need 3 of them. That they shot it that way in some ways because they could, or maybe they were hoping that the language of having a few extra cuttable angles, and then once that footage is in the edit room, it's gonna end up in the film. So,
but that's such a, like you were talking about, these kind of self-imposed restraints, making the sandbox smaller so that you this is the yard that we're playing in. That's such a smart way to go about it. I think that's something I personally try to do on every project. Because it's so easy to be like, we can do anything.
Right.
What should we do is really the question. And it comes from less choices.
Yeah, and you'd hear about films that are shot, like Red Rocket was shot on 1 lens primarily, or 2 lenses or something. And, already by having to figure out how do we tell this story with just this 1 lens or just these couple lenses, you're already on the right track, because you're already having to make a decision on every frame that's a little outside the box, which is going to lead to interesting conversations, which will allow you to have a better sense of how you're telling the story you're telling.
I personally tried that a couple of times, and it didn't work. Like, the theory, it's very appealing for the directors. Like, hey, Touch of Evil was shot in an 18 millimeter only, and The Godfather, it was a 40 millimeter only, and it's amazing, and the storytelling is great. Should we do that? And they all go like, no. No.
Although sometimes we end up in that situation, not on purpose. Like the last movie that Juan Mi and I did together, it feels like the 17.8 or whatever, the Primo.
17.5 and 21.
Those were 21. That was pretty much it.
Right.
But just because you're in the moment and we know the movie we're making, and we go, what lens should this be? And you go, obviously it's a 21.
But that was conscious, unconscious decision, because
Yeah.
that's one of the movies I tried to convince the director, let's go with one lens.
Right.
And he said no, and we had from 17.5 to 300 all the set, everything. But then the movie needed what the movie needed. The movie
Right.
needs what it needs, and the movie just naturally came to ask for those lenses.
Right.
And then
Right.
we ended up shooting the entire movie with two lenses, and not far apart from. It wasn't like 17 and 300. It was
No,
17
yeah.
and 21, very close.
Yeah.
And naturally, the movie came to that conclusion itself. Like, this is what we need. So
You get far enough into it, and you get to a position where you're like, yeah, we could shoot this on a 40 back here. But then inevitably, we're all sitting around, and you go, that's not the movie we're making.
That's not
Right.
the
And you're
movie.
already, that's that beautiful thing where the style of the film is taking place. Like if you're too locked into, if you'd have imagined a scene later in the movie where he's like, oh, we really need the 300 for that, like, scene or whatever. If you lock yourself in too much to those decisions and don't respond to exactly what is feeling right on the day and on set, and then, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's interesting. It's too bad that you couldn't
Just a signal.
make that convince
Just
out
to
of the
say
gate.
you did it.
Just
yeah.
to say that we decided. We knew from the first time I read the script that this would be shot between 17 and 21.
Yeah.
hey, what
so
would-
that-
also,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, is this next movie that you're prepping now? Is it in the same vein? Are you consciously trying, like you said, trying to do something a little different? Or are you like it still feels right to keep those?
No, this one was literally just the evolution of this insane TV show that we shot from 2016 to 2018. I can't remember the exact. Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie. So
17 to 19, I think, no?
17, 2017 to 2019. So this is like the movie version of a show that we made, which in some ways, everything we've ever done has been tied to this project in some ways. It was the first time I ever worked with Matt. Was on this goofy web show, which then turned into a Vice series, and we did 2 seasons. And now we're doing a movie, and there's about half of the 3rd season got shot before Viceland Canada imploded. So we have like a long history of. I feel like we'll just keep circling back to this project every 10 years. We'll end up making a new iteration of it or something.
But so a lot of the language is already kind of baked
Yes,
in from
very much so, and a lot of the fair use and the using kind of pop culture and copyrighted materials through fair use and parody is baked into the project itself. So it's very fun. Couple loose stock cameras out on the street, just like a tiny crew, and we did it mostly because after BlackBerry, we sort of had this moment of carte blanche to make something in Canada with Canadian money, and the actors strike was on in LA, and so the idea of going on doing the next big project wasn't ready. So we were like, let's go. Now's the time. So it's an all Canadian project, and we get to be the maniac, goofy idiots that we love to be, and then we'll probably go back to making a bigger narrative film after this.
Nice.
If the only dude watching this episode of our podcast is a kid from film school, what would be your advice for him if he wants to be a DP? What are the mistakes that you have done that you don't want him to make?
It's hard to say because the James Seamus, the Ang Lee's producer, has an amazing kind of take on advice from industry professionals, and that it's like always just complete bullshit. Like there's no reason to ever take advice from an industry professional, because the fact that one person's path, like the fact that I shot this web show with my friends and then we made a TV show and then I have been shooting music videos, and then we leveled up slowly and eventually got to make Blackberry, and now we'll make bigger and bigger movies. The fact that that worked for us, it probably didn't work for 200 people before us.
Mm-hmm.
So to say this is the way you do it, or you should just follow this path, is, and that kind of prescriptive career advice is just nonsense. Like there is absolutely no correct path. And I would say that maybe that in that is some advice, in that there is no right way to have a career as a DP. Somebody's total pitfalls of getting stuck making one type of movie might be somebody else's dream. So
yeah,
it's very tough to give career advice, like in film at all. Like really, if you find a way to make things and like they are finding an audience and people are watching them, you are on the right track. You know what I mean? If it happens to just be a YouTube channel and it's blowing up, great. You're nailing it.
Yeah.
You're killing it as a DP, right? Like it doesn't matter how, people have built their careers before. And yeah, I would say be very wary of career advice, because it's not, what works for one person is not at all going to work for somebody else. And if you're doing it and you're able to keep doing it, then great. But there's one piece of advice that I got from a professor of mine that I think is actually useful in film, which is that in one of my darker moments of film school, I sort of looked around the room and was thinking about that statistic where I think 98% of people who go to film school don't stay and continue on in a filmmaking career. Like it's staggering how few people continue working in film after going to film school. And I went to this professor. I said, how do I know I'm not one of those deluded fools who thinks this is their life and that it's not going to work out? And they said something really amazing, which is that, look, there's really only one thing I've noticed that's basically universal when it comes to people who have been successful in the field. And it's that the people that I've seen go on and be successful are people who are able to make a project, complete that project, put it out into the world, see it for what it is, including the mistakes, and start a new project based on learning from those mistakes. And if you could do that, you'll be fine. Because there are so many pitfalls in just that small thing that happens at the end of a project, where either you feel like, oh, it's complete shit, I screwed everything up and I'm not good at this, or you think it's brilliant and it's perfect and I did everything right and why aren't people seeing that? Both are useless reads, and they're not going to help you make the next film. The best thing you can do is be like, this is done, it's out, here are the things that are wrong with it, I won't make those mistakes again, and let's do a new one. Let's do the next film. And I think that's, at the very least, that hasn't led me astray yet.
Yeah, that's a
great
good
advice
piece
right
of advice, and it's the only probably healthy way of being in this business. Just do it with the goods and the bads, and then keep going. That's it.
Yeah, because people get crushed by something that didn't turn out. It will never turn out the way that you imagine. There will always be concessions, right? Like,
and sometimes happens that I watch a movie that I shot 20 years ago, that I thought it was crap, like my work was crap, and then I go like, it wasn't that bad,
right? Yeah,
and and I probably am doing the stuff I'm doing now. It's because I did this, so it may not be the right thing to do, or I didn't do it on the right way, but that led me to where I am now. So it's always useful, and everything is just one more step in the ladder.
Yeah. So. And it's good. Like I watched Blackberry now, and all I see are the shortcomings or the scenes we didn't quite nail the way that I was hoping, or where I didn't have time to get the lighting right, and I'm not happy with the way it looks. But I also know that that's just part of like having taste, and like the things that you should see all the problems in the work that you're making, but also realize that those problems are not make or break, and that if other people don't have an issue with them, and if you surround yourself with trusted collaborators who are able to also use their taste and tell you what matters and what doesn't, then you'll be fine, because you can just let those things go, know when you need to keep trying to fix them, and know when it's time to move on. And then, eventually, like you said, sometimes you look back on it and you're like, oh, this thing that I thought was a huge mistake is actually great. The fact that I, you know, dropped the camera on that take that I thought completely fucked up the take actually gave us a cut point, so so we could stitch it into this next take, and you had no idea, you know, like that's the magic of film.
Yeah, that's the beauty of our industry is collaboration and happy accidents, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and the tension.
Yes. Cool.
Well, I think this is it for today. I thank you very, 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 very much for being with us. It's been a fantastic chat. I'm so happy that you agreed to do this with us. I think it's a great beginning.
Hello, any chance to get this into it with other cinematographers is one that I would leap at. It's like
I think that this turned out to be exactly what Alex and I were thinking of. Just a chat with a colleague about the craft of making movies. And it's been a very interesting hour and a half, and I thank you for that.
Yeah.
Great.
Agreed.
I can't wait.
Good luck on the next project.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Whatever it may be. I look forward to watching the rest of the episodes.
See ya.